Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Terra Nova and watched the stars shift around them as they dropped out of hyperspace. The year was 2157, and humanity had finally built ships that could travel between the stars. For the first time in human history, they were about to meet beings from another world. "Captain, we're detecting massive energy signatures ahead," reported Lieutenant Sam Parker from his station. "Multiple ships, sir. They're huge." Jake looked at the main screen and felt his breath catch. Ships the size of cities floated in the darkness ahead of them. They were made of what looked like crystal, glowing with soft blue light. The smallest one was 10 times larger than the Terra Nova. "Open a channel," Jake ordered. "This is Captain Morrison of the Earthship Terra Nova. We come in peace." The response came immediately, not through their communication systems, but directly into their minds. The crew gasped as alien thoughts pressed against their consciousness. "Primitive vessel, you will halt and prepare to be boarded. I am Admiral Vex Kaller of the Catherian Fleet. You have entered territory controlled by the Galactic Federation." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The voice in his head was cold and filled with superiority. "Admiral, we are explorers from Earth. We had no knowledge of your territory. We seek peaceful contact. Peaceful or not, you will comply with Federation protocols. Your species will be evaluated for integration into the galactic community." A beam of light shot from the largest crystal ship and surrounded the Terra Nova. Jake watched helplessly as his ship was pulled toward the alien vessel. The bridge crew looked at him with fear in their eyes, but he tried to remain calm. "Remember your training," he told them. "We represent all of humanity today." The Terra Nova was brought into a massive docking bay inside the crystal ship. The walls pulsed with living light, and the air itself seemed to hum with energy. Jake and his diplomatic team put on their best uniforms and prepared to meet the aliens. Admiral Vex Kaller was waiting for them. The being stood nearly 8 feet tall, its body made of what appeared to be living crystal. Faceted surfaces reflected light in patterns that hurt to look at directly. When it spoke, its voice resonated through their minds rather than their ears. "Welcome to Federation space, humans. I have scanned your vessel and your species. You are remarkably primitive, but this is not unusual for newly discovered worlds." Jake stepped forward. "We may be new to space travel, but we are not primitive. We have culture, science, and a rich history." The crystal being's laughter was like breaking glass in their minds. "You have barely mastered faster than light travel. Your weapons are chemical explosives and simple energy beams. Your social structure is chaotic and inefficient. You are children playing with toys." "We prefer to call it diversity," Jake replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "Different ideas make us stronger. Diversity is weakness. Unity is strength. The Federation has maintained peace for over 10,000 years by ensuring that all species know their place. You will learn yours." Vex Kaller gestured, and holographic displays appeared around them. They showed thousands of different alien species, all organized in a complex hierarchy. At the top were beings of pure energy, followed by the crystal Catherians, then various other species arranged in descending order of perceived advancement. "This is the great chain of being," Vex Kaller explained. "Each species has its role to play in the cosmic order. The ethereals guide us with their wisdom. We Catherians maintain law and order. The Regelians provide military might. The Zentarians handle commerce and trade. And at the bottom, species like yours provide labor and resources." Jake studied the display and felt his anger growing. "You're talking about slavery." "We prefer the term guided development. Your species will be given a protectorate status. You will be protected, fed, and given simple tasks that match your capabilities. In return, you will provide what the galaxy needs from your world. And if we refuse?" The crystal being's faceted head tilted in what might have been amusement. "Species that refuse integration are classified as hostile. Hostile species are removed from the galaxy for the greater good. But this rarely happens. Most species see the wisdom in accepting their place." Jake felt the weight of his entire species' future on his shoulders. I need to discuss this with my government. Of course. You have 7 of your days to provide. An answer. Your ship will be escorted back to your homeworld. Remember, Primitive One, this is not a negotiation. This is an opportunity for your species to survive and prosper under proper guidance. The return journey to Earth felt like a funeral procession. The Terra Nova was surrounded by Cytherian escort ships, their crystal hulls glowing ominously in the darkness. Jake spent the time preparing his report, knowing that every word would be studied by the greatest minds on Earth. When they arrived at Earth, President Lisa Coleman was waiting for them. She was a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes, but Jake had never seen anyone project such quiet strength. The emergency session of the United Earth Council was held in the deepest bunker beneath Geneva, far from any possible alien surveillance. They see us as insects, Jake reported to the assembled leaders. Useful insects, but insects nonetheless. They want to put us in a cage and use us for whatever they need. President Coleman listened to the full report in silence. When Jake finished, she stood and walked to the large map of Earth on the wall. How long do we have? 6 days now, Madam President. They expect an answer. And what are our options? General Paul Norton, the head of Earth's military, spoke up. We could fight, but it would be suicide. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours. One of their ships could destroy our entire fleet. We could run, suggested Dr. Mary Walsh, the chief scientist. Evacuate Earth and find somewhere else to live. Where would we go? Asked Coleman. They control the galaxy. There's nowhere to run. We could surrender, said Ambassador Robert Clark. Accept their terms and hope for the best. President Coleman turned back to the assembled leaders. There is another option. We could lie. The room fell silent. Jake watched as the president's idea took shape in the minds of the world's leaders. We tell them we accept, Coleman continued. We play the role of primitive, obedient humans. We smile and nod and do what they tell us to do. But underneath we prepare? Prepare for what? Asked General Norton. For the day when we're ready to show them what humanity is really capable of. They think we're primitive. Let them think that. They think we're weak? Let them believe it. But while they're not looking, we learn everything we can about them. We study their technology, their weaknesses, their fears. And when the time is right, we show them that underestimating humanity was the biggest mistake they ever made. The vote was unanimous. Earth would begin the greatest deception in human history. 3 days later, Jake stood on the bridge of the Terra Nova again, facing Admiral Vexcaller. The alien's crystal form pulsed with expectation. We have made our decision, Jake said, his voice carefully humble. Earth accepts protectorate status under the Galactic Federation. We understand our place in the cosmic order. Wise choice, Primitive One. Your species will be assigned agricultural duties. You will grow food for the galaxy and learn to be grateful for the protection we provide. We understand, Jake replied. We are honored to serve. As the Cytherian ships departed, Jake sent the final official message from Earth to the galaxy. We understand, we will comply. Then Earth went silent, but it was not the silence of defeat. It was the silence of a predator, waiting in the darkness for the perfect moment to strike. The galaxy had no idea what was coming. 50 years had passed since Earth went silent, and Dr. Peter Hayes stood in the deepest laboratory humanity had ever built. The facility was carved into the ocean floor beneath the Pacific, hidden behind layers of rock and metal that no Federation scanner could penetrate. Around him, the greatest minds of 3 generations worked on projects that would have seemed impossible in 2157. The crystal matrix is finally stable, announced Dr. Karen White, holding up a small device that glowed with the same blue light. As Cytherian ships, we can now replicate their energy systems. Peter nodded as he examined the device. For decades, human scientists had studied every piece of Federation technology they could get their hands on. When the Cytherians had visited Earth for their annual inspections, they had unknowingly left behind traces of their advanced materials. Hair-thin fibers from their crystal bodies, microscopic fragments of their ship hulls, even residual energy patterns from their weapons. Excellent work, Peter said. How many years until we can power a full starship with this? Maybe 10, maybe 15, Karen replied. But we're not just copying their technology anymore, we're improving it. This was the secret that the Federation would never understand. Humans didn't just reverse engineer alien technology. They made it better. The Catherian energy matrix was efficient, but human engineers had found ways to make it more compact and powerful. Where the aliens saw perfection, humans saw room for improvement. Commander Amy Foster walked through the orbital shipyard that didn't officially exist. The facility was hidden in the asteroid belt, disguised as a mining station. To any Federation observer, it looked like humans were simply extracting minerals from space rocks. They had no idea that those same rocks were being hollowed out and turned into the most advanced warships in the galaxy. How many ships are ready for deployment? Amy asked Chief Engineer Bill Murphy. 47 full battleships, sir, Bill replied, plus over 200 smaller vessels, all equipped with the new stealth systems. Amy looked out at the ships floating in the hidden dock. They were beautiful in their deadliness, sleek and dark like hunting sharks. The stealth technology was purely human innovation. The Federation had never developed it because they had never needed to hide. They were the supreme power in the galaxy, or so they thought, and the new weapon systems? Fully operational, sir. The particle beams can cut through Catherian crystal. Hulls like paper. The quantum torpedoes can phase through their shields. And the neural disruptors can shut down their telepathic communications. Amy smiled. The Federation had made their first mistake when they revealed their capabilities to humanity. They had shown humans exactly what they needed to overcome. Every Federation strength had become a target for human ingenuity. Agent Carl Rodriguez sat in his office on the moon, surrounded by screens showing intelligence data from across the galaxy. His network of listening posts had been gathering information for decades, building a complete picture of Federation society that even the Federation itself didn't possess. The corruption is worse than we thought, he told his assistant agent, Maria Santos. The Ethereals haven't provided actual guidance in over 1,000 years. They just sit in their energy temples and let the other species fight over scraps. What about the Catherian military? Maria asked. Overconfident and rigid, they haven't fought a real war in centuries. Their tactics are predictable, their formations are standard, and their commanders are more concerned with politics than strategy. Carl pulled up a holographic display showing the Federation's military structure. Red lines connected various species and their roles in the galactic hierarchy. The Rigelians do most of the actual fighting, but they're kept deliberately weak. The Zentarians control the economy, but they're not allowed to have serious weapons. The smaller species are just cannon fodder. And they all hate each other, Maria observed. Exactly. The Federation maintains order through fear and division. They're not a united alliance. They're a prison where the inmates are too afraid to revolt. This intelligence was perhaps humanity's greatest advantage. While the Federation saw a stable, eternal order, humans saw a house of cards waiting to fall. They understood something the aliens had forgotten, that true strength comes from unity, not oppression. Back on Earth, the surface world continued its carefully orchestrated performance. Humans tended their farms, raised their families, and smiled politely whenever Federation inspectors visited. They played their role so well that even they sometimes forgot it was an act. But beneath the surface, entire cities thrived in hidden caverns. Millions of humans worked in secret factories, research facilities, and training centers. Children born in the underground cities grew up learning advanced physics alongside basic mathematics. They studied alien languages while pretending to speak only simple English. The key to the deception was that most humans genuinely lived simple lives on the surface. Only a select few knew the full scope of humanity's hidden development. The farmers who grew food for the Federation were real farmers. The small towns that dotted the landscape were real communities. The performance was authentic because it was mostly true. President Coleman had died 20 years earlier. But her successor, President Nancy King, continued the silent protocol with the same dedication. She met regularly with the Secret Council that guided humanity's hidden evolution, always in locations that changed frequently to avoid detection. "The latest reports from our deep space scouts are promising," reported Admiral Tony Blake, who officially didn't exist. "We've mapped 17 Federation military installations that they don't know we know about. We've also identified several star systems that would make excellent fallback positions if we need to relocate human populations." "And the other species?" President King asked. "Many are growing restless. The Aquarians in the Outer Rim have been asking questions about their place in the Federation. The Drakmori rebellion was crushed last year, but their ideas are spreading. The Federation's greatest fear is that the subjugated species will realize they outnumber their oppressors." "Good. When the time comes, we'll need allies, not just superior technology." The meeting continued late into the night, planning for a future that might be decades away. The hardest part of the silent protocol was not knowing when it would end. Entire generations of humans had been born, lived, and died during the Great Deception. Some questioned whether it was worth continuing, but Peter Hayes knew it was worth it. He had seen the first crude attempts to copy alien technology, and now he watched human engineers build machines that surpassed anything the galaxy had ever seen. He had witnessed the transformation of humanity from a single world species to a hidden galactic power. The Federation still sent their annual inspection teams to Earth. They still saw peaceful farmers and simple communities. They still classified humanity as a primitive agricultural species under their protection. But if they had looked closer, they might have noticed that human crops grew with unusual efficiency, that human children seemed remarkably intelligent, and that human adults had a strange confidence in their eyes. 300 years of silence was a long time. But for a species that had learned to think in terms of millennia rather than decades, it was just the beginning. Humanity was playing a game that the Federation didn't even know existed, and they were winning. The galaxy continued to spin, unaware that its future was being shaped by a species it had dismissed as primitive. The Great Deception continued, and with each passing year, humanity grew stronger, smarter, and more prepared for the day when they would finally break their silence and show the galaxy what they had become. In the hidden depths of human civilization, weapons were forged, plans were made, and patience was cultivated. The silent protocol had taught humanity its greatest lesson, that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is wait for the perfect moment to act. The year was 2450, and Fleet Admiral Zorthek of the Regelian Navy stood on the bridge of his flagship as it burned around him. Through the smoke and sparks, he watched in horror as another Federation world died. The planet below was being stripped bare by massive machines that moved like metal insects across its surface. "Sir, the Devourers have broken through the inner defense line," reported his communications officer, her voice cracking with fear. "The evacuation ships are being hunted down." Zorthek closed his 4 eyes and tried to process the magnitude of the disaster. In just 3 years, the things they called Devourers had consumed 17 star systems. They came from the dark space between galaxies, machines that turned entire worlds into more machines. No one knew who had built them, or why they existed. They simply consumed everything in their path. "Send the retreat signal," he ordered. "All remaining ships are to fall back to the Centauri line. Sir, there are still 2 million civilians on the planet." "They're already dead," Zorthek said quietly. "We can't save them. We can only try to save the next world." The Regelian Admiral watched as his once mighty fleet limped away from another defeat. The Federation had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years, but they had never faced anything like this. The Devourers adapted to every weapon, overcame every defense, and learned from every battle. They were the perfect enemy. On the Federation capital world of Nexus Prime, the Grand Council met in emergency session. Representatives from over 200 species filled the massive chamber, their voices raised in panic and anger. At the center of the chaos sat the ethereal speaker, a being of pure energy who supposedly channeled the wisdom of the galaxy's most advanced race. The outer rim has fallen, announced Counselor Ythmora, her insectoid form trembling. The Devourers have consumed 43 systems in the past year alone. Refugee ships are arriving faster than we can process them. What of our military response? Asked the Cytherian representative, his crystal form pulsing with agitation. Admiral Vex Calor, now ancient by his species' standards, projected his thoughts to the assembly. We have thrown everything at them. Particle beams, quantum torpedoes, stellar bombs, nothing works. They adapt to our weapons faster than we can deploy them. Then we must use the forbidden weapons, declared the Torcan ambassador, her scaled hide gleaming with aggression. Release the planet killers. Unleash the reality bombs. Better to destroy worlds ourselves than let them be consumed. Unacceptable, the ethereal speaker said, its voice echoing through every mind in the chamber. The cost in innocent lives would be too great. The cost of doing nothing is greater, the Torcan shot back. My people know war. Sometimes you must choose between terrible options. The debate raged for hours, but no solution emerged. The Federation's greatest strength had become its greatest weakness. They had grown comfortable in their superiority, soft in their dominance. They had forgotten how to fight a war they might lose. In the intelligence center beneath the council chambers, analyst Quinvel studied the latest reports from the front lines. The young Zentarian had been tracking the Devourer advance for months, and the patterns he saw filled him with dread. They're not random, he told his supervisor. The Devourers are following a specific strategy. They're targeting industrial worlds first, then agricultural centers, then population centers. They're dismantling our infrastructure piece by piece. That's impossible, his supervisor replied. They're machines. They don't have strategy. Look at the data, Quinvel insisted. They're learning our weaknesses and exploiting them. Whoever built these things understood how our society works. The supervisor dismissed his concerns, but Quinvel continued his analysis. The more he studied the Devourers, the more convinced he became that they were not just mindless destroyers. They were surgical instruments, designed to dismantle exactly the type of civilization the Federation had built. Meanwhile, on the front lines, the war continued to go badly. The Devourers had perfected their tactics. They would arrive in a system. With a small advance force, study the defenses, then return with perfectly adapted countermeasures. Federation ships that had never lost a battle were being torn apart by enemies that seemed to know their every weakness. Captain Rita Johansson of the Federation cruiser Starlight watched in disbelief as Devourer ships phased through her shields like they weren't there. The enemy had somehow learned to match their shield frequencies perfectly. Her weapons fired uselessly at targets that had already adapted to her weapon signatures. All hands abandon ship, she ordered as her vessel began to break apart. This is Captain Johansson. The Starlight is lost. As her crew evacuated, Rita saw something that chilled her to the bone. The Devourers weren't just destroying her ship. They were studying it, learning from it, preparing to use that knowledge against the next Federation vessel they encountered. Back in the capital, desperation was setting in. The Federation had lost nearly a quarter of its territory, and the losses were accelerating. Billions of beings had died or been displaced. The economy was collapsing under the strain of supporting massive refugee populations. We need to consider extreme measures, said Counselor Ythmora during another emergency session. Perhaps it's time to contact the Torcan Empire. A gasp went through the chamber. The Torcans were the Federation's ancient enemies, a warrior race that had been exiled to the Galactic Rim centuries ago. They were savage, violent, and completely untrustworthy. But they were also skilled fighters who might stand a chance against the Devourers. The Torcans would demand territory in exchange for their help, warned the Cytherian representative. They would want to reclaim their lost worlds. Better to share the galaxy with the Torcans than lose it to the Devourers. Ythmora replied. As the debate continued, a junior aide approached Ythmora with a datapad. She read it quickly, then stood to address the assembly. There may be another option, she announced. Our records indicate there is a protected world in the Sol system. The inhabitants were classified as a primitive agricultural species centuries ago. They might serve as additional resources. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank. They were discussing using a primitive species as cannon fodder against the Devourers. The humans, said Admiral Vexcaller, his crystal form brightening with recognition. I remember them, simple creatures but numerous. They might buy us time to regroup. It's been 300 years since we last had contact, Yuthmora continued. We should send an expedition to assess their current status. The vote was unanimous. A small fleet would be dispatched to Earth to conscript humanity into the war effort. No one expected much from the primitive species, but even primitive warriors were better than no warriors at all. 3 days later, a Federation task force consisting of 5 ships left for the Sol system. They expected to find a peaceful agricultural world populated by simple humans who would be grateful for the chance to serve their galactic betters. They had no idea that they were about to discover the galaxy's best-kept secret. The Devourers continued their relentless advance, consuming world after world. The Federation's greatest military minds struggled to find a solution to an enemy that seemed unstoppable. But unknown to them, the answer they sought had been hiding in plain sight for 3 centuries. Earth waited in silence as it had for generations. But that silence was about to be broken in a way that would change everything. The Federation task force dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, and Commander Thexville immediately knew something was wrong. His instruments showed no energy signatures from Earth, no communication signals, no signs of the billions of humans who should have been there. Sir, I'm detecting no life signs from the 3rd planet, reported his sensor officer. The energy readings are ... strange. Thexville studied the data with growing confusion. Earth appeared to be completely dead, but the atmospheric readings suggested it should still be habitable. Take us closer. Maybe their technology is too primitive to detect? As the 5 Federation ships approached Earth, they found a world that looked abandoned. Cities stood empty, their buildings overgrown with vegetation. Roads were cracked and broken. No lights shone in the darkness of the night side. It's like they all just vanished, whispered the communications officer. Perhaps they destroyed themselves, suggested another crew member. Primitive species sometimes do that when they develop dangerous technologies. Commander Thexville felt a chill run through his four-armed body. The Federation had counted on finding millions of humans to throw at the Devourers. Instead, they had found a ghost world. Prepare a landing party, he ordered. We need to investigate. The Federation shuttle landed in what had once been New York City. The massive structures still stood, but nature had begun to reclaim them. Vines crawled up the sides of skyscrapers and trees grew through cracked pavement. The silence was absolute. The landing party consisted of 12 Federation soldiers from various species. They moved carefully through the empty streets, their weapons ready for any threat. But the only sounds were their own footsteps and the wind through broken windows. Sir, I'm detecting some kind of structure ahead, reported the team scout. It looks like someone's been maintaining it. They approached what appeared to be a simple building, but as they got closer, they realized it was much more sophisticated than it looked. The walls were made of advanced materials, and energy patterns hummed beneath the surface. The front door opened before they could knock. A woman stood in the doorway, middle-aged with graying hair and wearing simple clothes. She looked completely ordinary, except for her eyes. Her eyes held depths that seemed to contain centuries of knowledge. Welcome to Earth, she said in perfect Federation standard. I am Director Helen Martinez. We've been expecting you. Commander Thexville stepped forward, his weapons lowered but ready. Director Martinez, I am Commander Thexville of the Federation. Fleet, we've come to assess your world's readiness to contribute to the war effort. Helen smiled, and there was something both sad and amused in her expression. The war against the Devourers, you mean? Yes, we've been watching. You're not doing very well. You've been watching? Thexville asked in confusion. How could you know about the war? Your world has no deep space communication systems, doesn't it? Helen asked Dot before Thexville could respond. Another figure materialized beside Helen. At first, the Federation soldiers thought it was some kind of hologram, but then they realized the man had been there all along. He had simply been invisible. Admiral Tony Blake, the man introduced himself, his stealth suit shimmering as it deactivated. Earth Defense Force. The Federation soldiers raised their weapons, but Tony held up his hand. Please, there's no need for hostility. You came here, asking for help, didn't you? Commander Thexville stared at the humans' equipment. The stealth technology was beyond anything the Federation possessed. That's impossible. Our sensors show your species never developed advanced technology. Your sensors show what we wanted them to show, Helen replied. We've been very careful about that for the past 300 years. 300 years? Thexville's mind raced. Since first contact. You've been hiding your true capabilities all this time? Not hiding, Tony corrected. Waiting. Helen gestured to the sky above them. Would you like to see what we've been waiting for? The Federation soldiers looked up and gasped. The sky was filled with ships, hundreds of them materializing out of nothing as their stealth systems deactivated. They were sleek and dark, unlike anything in the Federation fleet. They moved with a grace that spoke of technology far beyond what the Federation had achieved. This is impossible, Thexville breathed. We've monitored your world for centuries, you're farmers. You grow crops for the Federation? We do grow crops, Helen agreed. Some of us. Others have been busy with different projects. The largest ship in the fleet descended toward them, and Thexville could see that it was easily the size of a Federation dreadnought. But where Federation? Ships were bulky and obvious. This vessel was elegant and deadly. May I present the New Horizon? Tony said as the ship landed nearby. Flagship of the Earth Defense Force. A woman emerged from the ship, wearing a uniform that somehow managed to look both military and comfortable. She moved with the confidence of someone who had never doubted her ability to handle any situation. Captain Susan Wells, she introduced. Herself, I think we need to have a conversation. Commander Thexville found himself surrounded by humans, whose technology and bearing suggested they were far more advanced than any Federation species. It was like discovering that the family pet had secretly been a genius all along. I don't understand, he said. Why hide your capabilities? Why pretend to be primitive? Helen's expression grew serious. Because we watched how you treated primitive species. We saw how you organized your society, how you enslaved entire races and called it protection. We decided we didn't want to be part of that system. But you could have conquered the galaxy, Thexville protested. With technology like this, you could have ruled everything. We could have, Tony agreed, but we chose not to. We're not interested in ruling other species. We're interested in helping them. Captain Wells stepped forward. The Devourers are a problem that affects everyone. We're prepared to help you fight them, but not as your slaves or your cannon fodder. As equals. Equals, Thexville repeated. The word as if it were foreign. But the great chain of being clearly shows that some species are superior to others. The great chain is a lie, Helen said firmly. It's a tool used to maintain power. There are no superior or inferior species. There are only different ways of approaching problems. To demonstrate her point, Susan Wells gestured to her ship. A beam of energy shot out, but instead of destroying anything, it simply enveloped the Federation shuttle. When the energy faded, the shuttle was completely undamaged, but all its weapons and engines had been disabled. We could have destroyed your ship, Susan explained. But we chose to disable it instead. This is the difference between conquest and cooperation. Commander Thexville stared at his powerless shuttle, then at the humans who had effortlessly neutralized his entire task force. What do you want from us? Nothing, Helen replied. We want to give you something. A chance to rebuild your society? On a foundation of cooperation instead of domination. The Devourers will destroy everything if we don't stop them, Tony added. Your way of fighting them isn't working. You need a new approach, and you have one? Vexville asked. Captain Wells smiled. We have several, but first you need to understand something. The age of the Federation is over. What comes next depends on whether you're willing to work with us to build something better. As if to emphasize her point, more human ships appeared in the sky. They came from every direction, emerging from hiding places that the Federation had never suspected existed. The display of power was overwhelming, but somehow it didn't feel threatening. It felt like a promise. 300 years, Helen said. Quietly, we've been preparing for this moment for 300 years. Not to conquer, but to offer a better way. Commander Vexville realized that everything he had believed about the galaxy was wrong. The humans weren't primitive farmers. They were the most advanced species anyone had ever encountered. And they had been hiding in plain sight all along. The revelation would change everything. The news of humanity's revelation spread through the galaxy like wildfire. On every Federation world, beings who had lived their entire lives under the great chain of being suddenly questioned everything they had been taught if humans could. Hide their true nature for 3 centuries? What else had been a lie? General Dan Cooper stood on the bridge of the Earth Defense Force flagship, Destiny, as it led a fleet of 500 human ships toward the Devourer front lines. Around them flew vessels from dozens of species, all volunteering to fight under human command. The rigid hierarchy of the Federation was crumbling, replaced by something new. Sir, we're receiving surrender requests from 3 more Cytherian worlds, reported Communications Officer Lisa Park. They want to join the Alliance. Accept them, Don replied. And make sure they understand they're joining as equals, not as subjects. The transformation had been swift and dramatic. Within weeks of the revelation at Earth, species across the galaxy had begun declaring independence from the Federation. The Aquarians of the Outer Rim were the first, followed by the Drakmori rebels, then the mining colonies of the asteroid belt. Even some Cytherian worlds had chosen to break away from their crystal overlords. Not everyone had welcomed the change. The core Federation worlds still maintained that the old order was the only way to prevent chaos. But their military was falling apart as soldiers from subjugated species deserted to join the human-led alliance. Devourer ships detected, announced Tactical Officer Mike Chun. Massive force, sir, at least 2,000 vessels. Don studied the tactical display and felt no fear. The Devourers were still dangerous, but humans had spent centuries studying them through captured Federation intelligence. They understood the enemy in ways the Federation never had. Launch the first wave, he ordered. What followed was unlike any battle the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of the rigid formations and predictable tactics of Federation forces, the human fleet moved like a living thing. Ships darted in and out of formation, striking from unexpected angles, coordinating with a precision that seemed impossible. Commander Lucy Adams led the first assault group as they dove toward the Devourer mothership. Her fighters moved in patterns that confused the enemy targeting systems. Where Federation pilots flew in straight lines, humans flew in curves and spirals that made them nearly impossible to hit. Remember, they adapt to repeated tactics, Lucy called over the com. Keep changing your approach. The human pilots had trained for this moment for generations. They didn't just learn to fly their ships, they learned to think like warriors. Every engagement was different, every attack unpredictable. The Devourers, for all their adaptability, couldn't counter tactics that never repeated. I'm reading massive energy buildup in the mothership, reported scanner operator Julie Davis. They're charging some kind of weapon. Phase 2, Don ordered. Calmly. Suddenly, the space around the Devourer fleet filled with what looked like empty darkness. The enemy fired their superweapon, but the beam passed harmlessly through empty space. The human ships had vanished. Stealth fields active, confirmed Lucy's voice over the comm. Moving to attack positions. The Devourers spun in confusion, their sensors unable to detect the human fleet. They had adapted to every known form of cloaking technology. But human stealth systems worked on principles they had never encountered. When the humans reappeared, they were already inside the Devourer. Formation. Lucy's fighters struck the mothership's weak points with surgical precision, while the larger ships Engage the enemy fleet at point-blank range. Neural virus uploaded, reported cyber warfare specialist Mark Taylor. The logic virus is spreading. Through their network, this was humanity's secret weapon. While the Federation had tried to destroy the Devourers with brute force, humans had learned to fight them with information. The virus didn't damage the enemy machines, it confused them. It made them question their own programming, doubt their own sensors, hesitate when they should act. The effect was immediate and devastating. Devourer ships began firing on each other, their targeting systems corrupted by the virus. They're perfect. Coordination dissolved into chaos as conflicting orders spread through their network. It's working, Dan said with satisfaction. Begin the final phase. The human fleet regrouped and began a coordinated assault on the confused Devourers. But they weren't trying to destroy every enemy ship. Instead, they were capturing them, using advanced boarding techniques to take control of the machines and turn them against their own forces. "This is incredible," breathed Admiral Zorth Vec, watching from his Federation ship as humans accomplished in hours what the Federation had failed to do in years. They're not just defeating the Devourers. They're converting them. The battle was over in 6 hours. Where there had once been a massive Devourer fleet, there was now a collection of disabled machines and a few dozen converted ships under human control. But the real victory was what happened next. President Nancy King stood before the assembled representatives of 300 species in what had once been the Federation Council chambers. The great chain of being had been removed from the walls, replaced by a simple symbol showing circles of different sizes all connected to each other. "The new compact is not about rule," she explained to the gathered beings. "It's about cooperation. Every species, regardless of size or technology level, has something valuable to contribute." The transformation of galactic society was remarkable. Species that had been enemies for millennia began working together. The Torkans, once feared as savage warriors, became teachers of combat tactics. The Zentarians shared their economic knowledge freely instead of hoarding it. Even the Ethereals emerged from their temples to offer genuine guidance instead of empty platitudes. "How did you know this would work?" asked Counselor Ythmora, who had become one of the new compact's strongest supporters. Helen Martinez, now serving as Earth's ambassador, smiled. "Because we learned something during our 3 centuries of silence. True strength doesn't come from controlling others. It comes from helping them become stronger." The changes weren't limited to politics. Human technology, freely shared instead of hoarded, sparked a renaissance of innovation across the galaxy. The stealth systems that had hidden Earth for centuries became the foundation for new exploration vessels. The neural networks that had confused the Devourers became the basis for better communication systems. Most importantly, the galaxy learned to think differently about conflict. When the second Devourer wave arrived 2 years later, they faced not just human forces, but a united galaxy that had learned from human tactics. The enemy was defeated so completely that they retreated back to dark space and never returned. Ambassador Kevin Stone stood in his office on the orbital station that served as the new compact's headquarters, looking out at ships from hundreds of different species working together. 5 years had passed since the revelation at Earth, and the galaxy was unrecognizable. "The latest reports from the exploration fleets are promising," his aide informed him. "We've made contact with 17 new species in the Outer Rim. All of them are interested in joining the compact." Kevin nodded. The galaxy was expanding, growing, learning. The age of conquest and domination was over. In its place was an age of cooperation and mutual growth. The silent protocol had ended not with humanity revealing their weapons, but with them revealing their wisdom. They had shown the galaxy that the most powerful thing you could do was choose not to use your power until the moment was right. And when that moment came, they had used their strength not to conquer, but to liberate. Earth no longer stayed silent. When humans spoke, the galaxy listened not because they were forced to, but because humanity had something worth saying. The 300 years of silence had taught them the most important lesson of all, that true leadership comes from serving others, not ruling them. The galaxy had shifted, and it would never be the same again.